Mike Smith was enjoying his first months of retirement when the phone rang the other day, and he was called back to action.
You are blatantly adding to students' failures.
The new president of Vermont State University had resigned abruptly, citing personal reasons, but it followed weeks of protest on state college campuses. Students and faculty and unions did not like the plan to turn the libraries digital to save some money, as they tried to integrate 5 campuses into one new state university. Mike Smith agreed to help stabilize the ship, which he has done before. At the telephone company, at Burlington College, and leading the largest state government agencies as well. 2 weeks in, he's here to tell us how it's going. Joining us this morning from Castleton, Interim President Mike Smith. Welcome back to NBC5 In Depth.
Well, thanks for having me, Stuart.
Well, I thought we were done with these.
So did I.
So the Board of Trustees calls you, somebody calls you 3 weeks ago and says, would you be interested in taking over as interim president and launching Vermont State University?
Yes, that's the way it went. And I must say, I had to think about this because, we were having a pretty good time in retirement. But I really thought about this because these institutions that will make up Vermont State University are so critical to the state of Vermont. And so I, after much thought, said, I have to do this. I have to say yes because of the importance that these institutions have. We have certificate programs. This morning I was talking to somebody in an office, and across the way there was a pilot training program at VTC in Williston. We train nurses, we train electricians, we train plumbers, we train engineers. All those things are critical to the Vermont economy and the state of Vermont and the workforce that we need here in the state. And I just thought, given all the things that we've done in Vermont, all the things that I've been a part of in Vermont, that this was a critical piece that needed some help. So I said yes.
So I have all sorts of questions, but you've agreed to, I guess, a 6-month appointment to get beyond the actual unification of Vermont State University set for July 1. And you said that if this is done right, this could be a rural education model for the country. Vermont State University is facing a lot of financial challenges to achieve sustainability. And your initial charge is to try to figure out how to make that, how to cut some costs, for one. Have you given the board any sort of a initial plan yet?
No, I haven't, Stuart. And, this is my second week on the job. One of the things that I have looked at, and one of the things that I think is important, just remember the state of Vermont has contributed enormous amounts of money to the sustainability of the Vermont State University. And they've done that in the order of over $200 million. That's an enormous investment that they've made here. In return, they've asked us to cut $5 million a year for 5 years in order to eliminate a structural deficit of $25 million. We plan on doing that, and some of the things that we're looking at in '24 for our '24 budget are things like, reducing debt service, those types of stuff as we move forward at this university. One of the things I just want to remind viewers about is that, I've been in these situations before in state government where we had to make reductions, and the way to do that is to be open and transparent, and I plan to do that here. Now, just to put it in context, this year we'll have an expenditure budget of about $153 million. Cutting $5 million off that would be about 3.3%. That is something that we have to do, we will do, and we will make it for '24. We will make it. We will do that.
Yeah, I mean, But we all watched the reaction to your predecessor, Parwinder Grewal, proposing the libraries going digital and some changes in the sports leagues. And there was this blowback from students, from faculty, from unions. I mean, when you were on the couch as a private citizen not long ago and you saw this, did that kind of opposition surprise you?
No, I don't think so. I don't think it surprised me. And you know, one of the things that I did, as you know, was on my second day, I reversed all those decisions. I reversed the athletic decision. I reversed the library decision. Not because we won't go digital. We will go digital, but to determine what degree we will be digital and what stays in libraries, what moves, needs to come from the bottom up. We need the professionals to tell us how to move that process. We will be digital in part. We will have books in the library in part in the future. But the way that I want to approach it is from the bottom up in a collaborative sort of process instead of dictating it from the top down. In terms of the sports, one of the things I didn't have when I looked at it was the data that I needed to make what I thought were sound decisions. So I decided to put that on hold for 3 years, collect the data, and see where we are after 3 years. My hope and my goal is to keep athletics. And one of the things that I like about athletics is that it is a retention mechanism for our university. Nonetheless, I mean, the legislature, the governor, everybody's been very generous to this university. And in return, they've asked us to do some things that I think are achievable. And I plan on doing that.
For those who may not be familiar, the Vermont State University will integrate Northern Vermont, the Johnson Linden campus, the two campuses of Vermont Tech and Castleton, where we're speaking to you from today. What kind of reaction? You've traveled to all of those campuses, I understand, in the last couple of weeks. What kind of reaction are you feeling, are you getting?
I think, by and large, people see the benefits of the transformation to a single entity. By and large, there are people that don't and express it, and I welcome their opinions. But this has been a 3-year process, and we're moving forward in that 3-year process in order to bring this under the umbrella of Vermont State University. And the reason we're doing that is we're delivering academics to where people are. We're doing it in the classroom, we're doing it online, we're doing a hybrid model. And what I want in this state is that somebody walking out of their door or walking out from graduation from high school, or even before graduation, taking courses in our institutions, have the ability to have a higher education and moving them in directions that they want to go to get high-paying jobs. Like I said, we have degree programs, we have certificate programs, we have all sorts of programs where there are high-paying jobs in Vermont ready for our students once they graduate. And I want to encourage that. And I think that bringing these institutions together and moving forward as one and really meeting the students at the door, whether it's a graduation door or their front door, I think is important. Look, I was a non-traditional first-generation student, and I know how important a college education is. And so, you know, I'm here to really try to make sure that every Vermonter gets that opportunity, whether rich or poor, they get that opportunity to have that college education.
So the launch still on track for July 1. How
it is.
How will, for example, at Castleton, how will being a student change, the student experience change in the fall?
Well, one of the things that won't change is the enthusiasm of the faculty, the caring of the faculty, the commitment of the faculty to make sure that students have an experience on the various campuses that they wish to choose to live. What will change is their world will become more expansive in terms of what they can choose from in terms of course selection or how they choose to get their education. That is a big thing. And when I talked about a national rural model, that is what I'm talking about. Delivery of the college experience and academic wherewithal to provide your college experience where you want to be, where you are, and the ability to use the various campuses and the various expertise in the campus is, I think, is exciting. For example, if I want a meteorology course and it's offered in Linden, I can take it right here in Castleton. And that is something that I think is exciting.
Have you seen any indication of a decline in student retention as a result of the tumult this year?
I haven't looked into the retention numbers. Our enrollment numbers, I don't know if you can attribute to that or the general demographics of the Northeast. Our enrollment numbers have taken a dip. I kind of expected that. Not only the demographics and COVID, but also the, some of the controversy that has happened. I believe that's going to stabilize as we move forward and start, and we can start growing that as we move forward and start working as one institution. My hope is that that sort of dip goes away.
Yeah. You're spending some time in your first couple of weeks, I guess, both working and living on campus. You're back in the dorm, President Smith?
Yes. Yeah, I haven't been kicked out of the house. I'm just, I wanted to experience the college experience that our students, the campus life experience that our students are going through right now. That included, staying in the dorm. Now, I want to be clear, I was staying in a little upscale room than the regular rooms because it had, it was a resident assistant room, so it had its own bathroom and its own little kitchenette. The bed was about the same, but and it was right next to the dining hall, so I got to experience, residential life. I got to experience the dining halls. And matter of fact, I've been to just about every dining hall and talked to students about their experiences at various campuses here. And it's been a blast listening to them. These are bright students that have a lot to say, and I really appreciate what they do say when they're talking to me.
Well, good luck. You have a lot on your shoulders, and the man who's been referred to as Mr. Fix-It is back as the interim president of the Vermont State University. Mike Smith, thanks very much for your time here with us this week.
Thank you, Stuart.
We'll be checking back in with him. Next, it's time to get outdoors.